Step off the porch, now.
Excuse me? This is my porch, my home.
I don't care whose porch you think it is. You match a suspect description.
Officer, what suspect? What description? I'm with my daughter.
Don't make this difficult.
The voice wasn't panicked. It wasn't defensive. It was measured, almost clinical. The kind of tone a man uses when he's already 3 steps ahead of the person threatening him. But Officer Derek Halloway didn't hear the warning. He heard defiance. And in his mind, defiance from a black man on a porch in a nice neighborhood was grounds enough for escalation. What Officer Halloway didn't know, what he couldn't have known from his patrol car as he rolled up with his assumptions loaded and his body camera recording, was that the man standing on that porch wasn't just another face to run through his mental profiling checklist. His name was Richard Okoro, and he was a 42-year-old senior special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, assigned to the Violent Crimes Division out of the Minneapolis field office. He had 16 years with the Bureau. He had worked counterterrorism in Iraq. He had interrogated cartel lieutenants in El Paso. He had testified before Congress on domestic extremism. And right now, on a warm Thursday evening in June, he was standing on the front porch of his home in Edina, Minnesota, a wealthy suburb southwest of Minneapolis, holding a watering can, tending to the hanging baskets of petunias his wife had planted, while his 7-year-old daughter, Amara, sat on the porch swing reading a book about butterflies. This is the story of what happened when a small-town cop with a big ego tried to enforce his authority on a man who had more authority in his pinky finger than the officer would ever see in his entire career. And it's a story about what happens when implicit bias, unchecked power, and arrogance collide with federal jurisdiction, constitutional law, and a man who refuses to be intimidated on his own damn porch. Let's begin. It was 6:47 p.m. on June 14th. The sun was still high, casting long golden shadows across the manicured lawns of Countryside Estates, one of Edina's most desirable neighborhoods. The houses here weren't just big, they were statements. Colonial facades, 3-car garages, professionally landscaped yards that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Richard and his wife, Dr. Natasha Okoro, a cardiothoracic surgeon at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, had moved into the neighborhood 2 years earlier. It was the kind of place they'd worked their entire lives to afford. The kind of place where their daughter could ride her bike on the sidewalk without fear. The kind of place where you waved at your neighbors and borrowed cups of sugar. Except Richard had noticed something in those 2 years. The waves were polite, but stiff. The conversations were short. And more than once, he'd seen curtains move when he pulled into his driveway. He'd chalked it up to the usual awkwardness, being one of only 3 black families on a street of 40 homes. He didn't like it, but he understood it. What he didn't expect was that his presence on his own porch would be seen as suspicious. Richard was wearing a white linen shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, and dark jeans. His feet were bare. He was watering the flowers his wife had reminded him about that morning before she left for a 12-hour shift in the OR. Amara, in a yellow sundress and her hair in 2 puffballs, was swinging gently on the porch swing, narrating the life cycle of monarch butterflies to herself. "Daddy, did you know butterflies taste with their feet?" she asked, not looking up from her book. Richard smiled. "I did not know that, baby girl. That's wild. It says here they land on flowers and taste if it's yummy before they drink the nectar." "Smart little guys," Richard said, setting the watering can down on the porch railing. He glanced at his watch. Natasha would be home in about 3 hours. He was thinking about what to make for dinner. Maybe pasta, maybe grilled chicken. That's when he heard the engine. A police cruiser, white with blue and gold striping, Edina Police Department emblazoned on the side, rolled slowly down the street. It slowed as it approached Richard's house. Then it stopped, right in front of his driveway. Richard's stomach tightened. He'd been a federal agent long enough to recognize the look, the pause, the assessment, the decision. The officer inside the car stared at him for a long moment. Then the cruiser door opened. Officer Derek Halloway stepped out. He was in his early 30s, white, with a buzz cut and wraparound sunglasses that he didn't take off even as he approached. He was about 5 feet 10 inches, stocky, with the kind of build that came from gym workouts, not real physical labor. His uniform was crisp, his belt loaded with equipment, taser, baton, pepper spray, gun. He walked with a swagger, chest puffed out, like he was walking onto a stage. Richard watched him approach. He didn't move. He didn't tense. He simply watched. Halloway stopped at the base of the porch steps. He looked up at Richard. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He didn't say, "Good evening, sir. Just checking in," he said. "Step off the porch." Richard blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I said step off the porch. We've had reports of a burglary in the area. You match the description of a suspect." Richard glanced down at his bare feet, then back at the officer. "A burglary suspect in this neighborhood?" "That's right." "And what's the description?" Halloway's jaw tightened. "Black male, late 30s to early 40s, dark clothing." Richard looked down at his white linen shirt. He looked back at the officer. "I'm wearing white." "Close enough," Halloway said. "Now step down so I can talk to you." Richard felt the heat rising in his chest. Not panic, not fear, anger. He'd been in situations like this before, not often, but enough. He knew what this was. This wasn't about a burglary. And this was about a black man standing on a porch in a white neighborhood, and a cop who couldn't reconcile that image with his internal bias. "Officer," Richard said, his voice calm but firm, "I'm standing on my porch. This is my home. I'm not matching any description because I haven't left my property. I'm watering flowers with my daughter." Halloway looked past Richard to Amara, who had stopped swinging and was now watching with wide eyes. The officer's expression didn't soften. "Doesn't matter," Halloway said. "I need to verify your identity. Step down." "You need to verify my identity," Richard repeated slowly. "On my own porch." "That's right. Do you have a warrant?" Halloway's face flushed. I don't need a warrant to talk to someone." "You do if you're demanding I leave my property to comply with an investigatory stop without reasonable suspicion." The air seemed to freeze. Halloway took off his sunglasses. His eyes were hard, cold. "You a lawyer or something?" "Or something," Richard said. Halloway stepped onto the first porch step. Richard's hand instinctively moved in front of Amara, a subtle gesture, protective. The officer noticed. "Don't make this difficult," Halloway said, his voice dropping into that authoritative growl cops use when they want to intimidate. "I can make this real easy or real hard for you." Richard stared at him, and then he said something that would later be quoted in depositions, news articles, and internal affairs reports. "You're making a mistake you won't recover from." Officer Halloway didn't like being warned. He didn't like being told he was making a mistake. In his 3 years with the Edina Police Department, he'd pulled over plenty of people who talked tough. They all ended up complying. Or they ended up in cuffs. He took another step up the porch. Now he was on the second step, just a few feet from Richard. "Last chance," Halloway said. "Step down, show me your ID, and we'll clear this up." Richard didn't move. His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "I'm going to ask you again, officer. What is your reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime?" Halloway's hand drifted toward his belt. "You're obstructing my investigation." "There is no investigation," Richard said. "You're on a fishing expedition, and you've just entered the curtilage of my home without permission, without a warrant, and without exigent circumstances. I don't need your permission. Yes, you do. Richard cut him off. His tone didn't rise, but it sharpened. This porch is an extension of my home. It's constitutionally protected under the Fourth Amendment. Collins versus Virginia. Florida versus Jardines. If you take one more step, you are conducting an illegal search. Halloway froze. He wasn't used to people quoting case law at him. He wasn't used to people standing their ground. And he especially wasn't used to being lectured by someone he'd already decided was a suspect. Who the hell do you think you are? Halloway sneered. Before Richard could answer, the front door opened. Mrs. Keisha Dupree, Richard's next-door neighbor, stepped out of her own house. She was a 68-year-old retired schoolteacher, a black woman who'd lived in the neighborhood for 15 years, long before it became desirable. She was holding her phone. "Officer," she called out, her voice sharp and clear. "I'm recording this. That is my neighbor. He lives there, and you are harassing him." Halloway turned, startled. "Ma'am, step back inside. This is official police business." "This is a man standing on his own porch," Mrs. Dupree shot back. "And you are about to make a fool of yourself." Halloway's face turned red. He turned back to Richard. "I'm done asking nicely. Either you step down and provide ID, or I'm arresting you for obstruction." Richard looked at his daughter. Amara's eyes were wet, her little hands gripping the edge of the swing. He could see the fear starting to bloom in her face. He didn't want her to see this. He didn't want her to remember her father being handcuffed on their porch by a cop who couldn't see past his own prejudice. But he also knew that if he backed down now, if he complied with an illegal order, it would set a precedent, not just for him, but for every black family in every nice neighborhood who would be subjected to the same suspicion, the same demands, the same violation of their constitutional rights. So, he made a choice. "Amara," Richard said softly, not taking his eyes off the officer. "Go inside, lock the door, call Mommy." "Daddy." "Now, baby, go." Amara scrambled off the swing and darted inside, clutching her book. The door clicked shut. Richard heard the lock turn. I want you to think about that moment. A 7-year-old girl, reading about butterflies on her own porch, now running inside, scared because a cop decided her father looked suspicious. If that makes you angry, if you think this needs to stop, show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. Every like pushes this story to more people. Every subscriber helps hold systems accountable. Now, here's what Richard said next that should have made the officer walk away. He turned his full attention back to Officer Halloway. "You are about to arrest me," Richard said, his voice quiet but clear. "So, let me make sure you understand what you're doing. You are arresting a federal agent on his own property without cause. Every second of this is being recorded by your body camera, by my neighbor, and by the Ring doorbell camera right above your head." He pointed. Halloway's eyes flicked up. There, mounted above the door, was a Ring camera, its blue light glowing. "You have no warrant," Richard continued. "You have no probable cause. You have no exigent circumstances. What you have is a presumption that a black man on a porch in this neighborhood must be doing something wrong. And you're about to turn that presumption into a civil rights violation that will cost you your career." Halloway's hand went to his cuffs. "Turn around." "I'm not resisting," Richard said. He placed his hands on the porch railing, palms down. "But I want it on record that I told you to stop." Halloway grabbed Richard's wrist and yanked it behind his back. The metal cuffs clicked shut. Then the other wrist. Richard didn't fight. He didn't pull away. He stood there calm, controlled, while the officer, who had no idea who he was arresting, secured the restraints. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice," Halloway said, breathing hard, adrenaline pumping. Richard said nothing. He simply looked at Mrs. Dupree, who was still recording. "Call my wife," Richard said. "Natasha Okoro, Abbott Northwestern, and call the Minneapolis FBI field office. Ask for Supervisory Special Agent Karen Lindholm. Tell her Richard's been arrested. She'll know what to do." Mrs. Dupree nodded, her hands shaking. "I'm calling right now, baby. Don't you worry." Halloway walked Richard down the porch steps, gripping his arm tighter than necessary. He shoved him toward the patrol car. Richard didn't stumble. He walked with his head up, his back straight. As Halloway opened the back door of the cruiser, Richard said one more thing. "When this is over, officer, you're going to wish you'd just driven past my house." The ride to the Edina Police Department headquarters took 12 minutes. Officer Halloway didn't say a word. Richard didn't either. He sat in the back of the cruiser, hands cuffed behind him, staring out the window at the familiar streets of his neighborhood. Rolling past. He wasn't afraid. He'd been in worse situations. Interrogation rooms with terrorists, standoffs with armed suspects, undercover operations where one wrong word meant death. This was just bureaucracy with a badge. But he was angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger. The cold, calculated kind. The kind that plans. When they arrived at the station, Halloway pulled into the Sallyport and yanked Richard out of the car. He marched him through the back entrance, past the holding cells, and into the booking area. The booking sergeant on duty was Sergeant Luis Dominguez, a 52-year-old veteran of the department with 28 years on the force. He looked up from his paperwork as Halloway walked in with Richard. Dominguez's eyes narrowed. He stood up slowly. "Halloway," Dominguez said carefully. "Who's this?" "Obstruction arrest," Halloway said, pushing Richard toward the desk. "Refused to comply with a lawful investigation. Matched a suspect description." Dominguez looked at Richard. He took in the bare feet, the white linen shirt, the calm expression. Then he looked at Halloway. "What investigation?" "Burglary call. Suspect seen in the Countryside Estates area." "Uh-huh." Dominguez walked around the desk. "And where did you find this gentleman?" "On a porch. His porch, he claims." "He claims," Dominguez repeated. He looked at Richard. "Sir, do you live in Countryside Estates?" "I do," Richard said. His voice was steady. 4782 Amber Ridge Lane. I was watering flowers on my front porch when Officer Halloway entered my property and demanded I leave my porch to submit to an investigatory stop. I declined. He arrested me. Dominguez's jaw tightened. He looked at Halloway. "Did you verify the address?" He was acting suspicious. "Did you verify the address?" Halloway hesitated. "No." "Jesus Christ," Dominguez muttered. He turned to Richard. "Sir, I apologize. What's your name?" "Richard Okoro." "Mr. Okoro, can I see some identification?" "It's in my front pocket. I can't reach it." Richard gestured with his chin toward his cuffed hands. Dominguez shot Halloway a look that could have melted steel. "Uncuff him. Now." "But Sarge." "Now." Halloway fumbled with his keys and unlocked the cuffs. Richard brought his hands forward and rubbed his wrists. He reached into his front pocket and pulled out a black leather wallet. He opened it. Inside was his FBI credentials, a gold badge, a photo ID, the words, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent. Sergeant Dominguez went pale. He took the wallet, stared at it, then looked up at Richard. "You're FBI. Senior Special Agent," Richard said calmly. "Violent Crimes Division, Minneapolis Field Office." The room went silent. Halloway stood there frozen, his face draining of color. He looked like a man who'd just realized he'd stepped on a landmine. Dominguez handed the credentials back to Richard. "Agent Okoro, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, Sergeant," Richard said. "But I need you to do something for me. I need you to preserve Officer Halloway's body camera footage immediately. I need a copy of the arrest report. And I need your watch commander down here, now. Yes, sir. Dominguez turned to Halloway. Give me your body camera. Halloway didn't move. Give me the camera, Halloway. With shaking hands, Halloway unclipped the camera from his chest and handed it over. Dominguez took it and locked it in an evidence locker. Sit down, Dominguez ordered Halloway, pointing to a bench against the wall. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. Don't even breathe loud. Halloway sat. Within minutes, Lieutenant Jane Moreno, the watch commander, came down. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-40s with a no-nonsense demeanor. She took one look at Richard, one look at Halloway, and closed her eyes. Tell me this isn't what I think it is, she said. It's exactly what you think it is, Dominguez said. Moreno turned to Richard. Agent Okoro, I'm Lieutenant Moreno. On behalf of the Edina Police Department, I apologize. This should never have happened. No, Richard said. It shouldn't have, but it did. And now we need to talk about why. They moved to an interview room, not an interrogation room, an actual conference room, with a table and chairs and a water cooler. Lieutenant Moreno sat across from Richard. Sergeant Dominguez stood by the door. Officer Halloway was still sitting on the bench outside, staring at the floor. Agent Okoro, Moreno began. Can you walk me through what happened? Richard did. Calmly, methodically. He recounted every word, every action, and every violation. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't need to. The facts were damning enough. When he finished, Moreno sat back in her chair. And you told him you were a federal agent? I told him he was making a mistake, Richard said. I didn't identify myself as FBI because I shouldn't have to. I'm a citizen. I was on my property. I wasn't committing a crime. The fact that I'm a federal agent doesn't change the constitutional violation. It just makes the optics worse for your department. Moreno nodded slowly. I understand. And I agree. Do you? Richard leaned forward. Because here's what I think happened, Lieutenant. I think Officer Halloway saw a black man on a porch in a wealthy white neighborhood and made an assumption. I think he decided I didn't belong there. I think he used a vague burglary call as a pretext to harass me. And when I didn't immediately defer to his authority, his ego couldn't handle it. So he escalated. Moreno didn't argue. She couldn't. How many times has he done this before? Richard asked. How many people who don't have a badge and a law degree has he pulled this on? How many people complied because they were afraid of what would happen if they didn't? I don't know, Moreno admitted. But I'm going to find out. Good, Richard said. Because I'm filing a formal complaint. I'm also filing a federal civil rights lawsuit. And I'm going to make sure every media outlet in the Twin Cities knows that the Edina Police Department arrested an FBI agent on his own porch for the crime of being black. Moreno swallowed hard. I understand. I hope you do, Richard said. He stood up. Now, unless you're charging me with something, I'm going home to my daughter. You're free to go, Moreno said quickly. And again, I'm sorry. Richard walked out of the conference room. As he passed Officer Halloway, he stopped. He looked down at the man who'd cuffed him, who'd tried to humiliate him, who'd violated his rights. Halloway didn't look up. You know what the saddest part is? Richard said quietly. I would have shown you my badge if you just asked nicely, if you treated me like a human being instead of a threat. But you couldn't do that, could you? Halloway said nothing. Richard walked out. The story broke 2 days later. FBI agent arrested on own porch by Edina officer, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Racial profiling allegations, rock wealthy suburb. WCCO News. Body camera footage shows officer ignoring agent's rights. KSTP. The body camera footage went viral. It was played on every local news station, then picked up nationally. CNN ran it. MSNBC ran it. Even Fox News covered it, though with a different angle. The video showed everything. Officer Halloway approaching the porch, Richard's calm refusal, the lack of any criminal behavior, the arrest, the neighbor filming, the ring camera capturing it all. Legal analysts weighed in. This is a textbook Fourth Amendment violation, said a professor from the University of Minnesota Law School. The officer had no warrant, no probable cause, and no exigent circumstances. The fact that the victim happened to be a federal agent is almost irrelevant. This would be illegal no matter who was on that porch. The FBI issued a statement. The FBI is aware of the incident involving Special Agent Richard Okoro. Yeah, we support Agent Okoro fully and are cooperating with local authorities to ensure accountability. The Edina Police Department issued their own statement. We take these allegations seriously. Officer Halloway has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. But Richard wasn't satisfied with statements. He hired attorney Benjamin Cross, one of the top civil rights lawyers in Minnesota. Cross filed a lawsuit in federal court. Okoro versus City of Edina et al. The complaint was devastating. It outlined the arrest, the constitutional violations, and a pattern of behavior. Because once the story broke, other people came forward. A black couple who'd been stopped while jogging in the neighborhood. A Hispanic teenager questioned for looking suspicious while waiting for his school bus. A Middle Eastern family who'd been followed by a patrol car for 6 blocks. All by Officer Derek Halloway. The pattern was undeniable. And if you're watching this thinking, I've seen this before, you're right. This pattern happens every day across this country. If you want to see more stories that expose these patterns and hold people accountable, hit that subscribe button right now. We've got a whole series on civil rights violations you need to see. Now, back to what happened when the city's lawyers saw that body camera footage. The city of Edina's attorneys tried to argue qualified immunity. They tried to claim Halloway had acted in good faith. But the video made that impossible. You can't claim good faith when you're on camera violating clearly established law. 3 months later, the city settled. $750,000. A public apology. And Officer Derek Halloway's termination. But Richard didn't stop there. He used the settlement to establish the Okoro Civil Rights Legal Fund, a nonprofit that provided free legal representation to people in Minnesota who'd experienced police misconduct but couldn't afford attorneys. 6 months after the arrest, Richard stood in front of a community town hall in Minneapolis. The room was packed. Community organizers, activists, residents, police reform advocates. He told his story. Not for sympathy, but to make a point. I was lucky, Richard said. I had a badge. I had a law degree. I had resources. I knew my rights. But what about the people who don't? What about the teenager who gets stopped and doesn't know they can refuse a search? What about the family who gets harassed and thinks they just have to take it? He paused, looking out at the crowd. This wasn't about me being an FBI agent. This was about a police officer who saw a black man where he didn't think a black man should be, and decided that was enough to violate his rights. That's the problem. Not the individual officer, though he was part of it, but the system that trains officers to see people like me as threats first and citizens second. The crowd erupted in applause. Richard went back to work at the FBI. He still lived in the same house. He still watered the same flowers, and his daughter, Amara, still sat on the porch swing reading about butterflies. But things had changed. The neighbors waved more. They stopped to chat. One family even brought over a casserole with an apology note. We're sorry we didn't speak up sooner. Richard appreciated the gesture, but he knew the work wasn't done. Because for every Richard Okoro with a badge and a platform, there were 1,000 people without either, experiencing the same violations, the same assumptions, the same indignities. And until that changed, the fight would continue. Officer Derek Halloway never worked in law enforcement again. His name became a case study in police training seminars across the country, an example of what not to do. The Edina Police Department implemented new policies. Every officer had to complete implicit bias training. Body cameras became mandatory. And the department created a community oversight board to review complaints. But the real change happened in living rooms, at dinner tables, in conversations between parents and children. Because Richard's story wasn't just about one arrest. It was about the invisible lines drawn in neighborhoods, either the assumptions made about who belongs and who doesn't, and the courage it takes to stand your ground even when everything in the system is designed to make you back down. Richard Okoro stood on his porch and refused to move, and in doing so, he moved the entire city. What would you have done in Richard's position? Would you have complied, or would you have stood your ground? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe in protecting our constitutional rights, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served. Know your rights, protect your home, and never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong in a place you've earned.